Ladies and gentlemen, dear members and colleagues, on behalf of the Franco-German Office for the Energy Transition, I wish you a good morning. Thank you very much for having registered and tuned in today for this webinar on the handling of acceptability of large infrastructure projects, challenges and strategies. The energy transition changed many things, and we see today in a broader context. If we look at the situation in Ukraine, for example, and the impact it has on our nations in terms of energy supply and cost, but also if we look at domestic power generation in Germany and France, that things are moving. And they will have to, if our countries and our economies want to achieve that triple aim of energy policy, a stable, affordable, and clean energy system. But decarbonizing generation implies a massive development of PV and wind farms. Both Germany and France also anticipate a growing demand for electricity, which emerges from the increasing electrification of mobility and heat. While only 20 to 25% of all energy consumed in Germany and France is currently electric, this value will increase to roughly 50% in OECD countries, according to the IEA by 2050. This shift highlights not only a substantial requirement for new generation capacities, but also for an adequate grid infrastructure able to cope with fluctuating input and capable to transport and distribute this electricity in the right second to the right user. While this highlights the importance of grid development, we also see issues with acceptability of infrastructure projects, also beyond the energy transition, of course, as a worldwide phenomenon. This is precisely what we would like to look into today, and it's a great privilege for me to welcome Jan Hildebrandt, Head of Environmental Psychology at the Institute for Future Energy and Material Flow Systems, the ICES, who will share his observations and interpretations with us. We will be later joined by Saskia Albrecht, Team Leader Communication and Stakeholder Management at Transnet BW, and Delphine Porfirio, Director of the Consultation and Environment Department at RTE, for a debate. Now, before I'll pass over to you, Jan, some technical announcements. We are aware of the fact that this issue stirs a lot of interest and that you might have quite a few questions for our speakers. You can submit them via the question function of the webinar cockpit. We will do our best to keep at least 20 minutes for a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but that might not be enough to answer all of them. I'd like to apologize for this eventuality straight away. Our speakers agreed, however, that we send them all unanswered questions after the end of the webinar, so they might get in touch with you directly. Also, this session is being recorded. The slides will soon be available on our website, and you will be able to access the video in the members section of our website. A big thank you to ICES, RTE, and Transnet BW for agreeing to this. You shall receive a mail notifying you once the files are available for you to download. If you should experience difficulties with the sound or the image, my advice for you would be to shut down the webinar plugin and relaunch it by clicking the link in the notification mail you received this morning. And one last thing before we start. At the end of the webinar, you can fill in a quick questionnaire of just 5 questions. You can skip that, of course, but if you participate, you will be able to help us to improve our offer. Very well, that's all from my side for now. Jan, please take over. Have a great webinar, everyone. Speak to you later.
Yes, good morning, everybody. As announced, and thank you for the kind introduction, my name is Jan Hildebrandt from the ICES in Saarbrücken in Germany, and I'm happy to share some results of our research and some thoughts on the question of acceptance connected to new transmission lines or to general question of grid extension. On the next slide, you see some main factors which we already know. So one main question in acceptance research connected to grid extension is, how do people respond to new transmission lines, and which are the relevant factors in this context? And there has been some research on that questions in the last years. And you see the collection of the main important factors. Of course, there is even more research done than I reported here, and maybe even some more smaller factors, but I think these are the main ones which you can extract from the literature. And as new transmission lines, of course, mean a significant change in the known living environment of people in both ways, from the landscape view, but also maybe in how they perceive their region and their place. Of course, landscape impact are one relevant factor connected to the questions of place attachment and place identity, and how people perceive this change and respond to it, and if it's successful to integrate the new infrastructures in the existing place identity or not. Another relevant point or factor in this context is the risk perception. I think many of you are aware of the discussions around electromagnetic fields, EMF, connected to transmission lines, but also the risks for nature and the environment. And this is, of course, then only also part of environmental impact assessments, but also for the acceptance, it plays a relevant role. And also in this context, it's, for instance, one relevant point, the different perceptions of experts and laypersons, which might differ somehow, and whereas experts are looking much more connected to objective measures, the layperson's perspective is more subjective, and so we have sometimes also conflicts in the communication about the risks. One relevant factor is the distributive justice. That means the distribution of pros and cons. Relevant in this context, it's not only about material or monetary pros and cons, but also about immaterial. One point is, for instance, which counts especially for Germany, but maybe also for other countries, that we have some regions which are located in the middle of Germany, kind of a transport region, and in the north where the electricity is produced, in the south where it's used, and some of the regions in between as well, we have no real benefits from just being crossed by the transmission lines, and so this would be a typical example for a distributive justice conflict. And also, of course, this conflict can be, or this justice perceptions can be on different stakeholder levels. I mentioned here land use conflicts for farmers, or the fear of decreasing property prices from residents. And you see also then that those conflicts are also related to the last point, which is the technology use. So whereas the falling property prices are mainly connected to the overhead lines, and that people fear that the pylons would reduce the prices of their houses. The first traces where underground cables are used show that there are some conflicts with the local farmers, and the questions of they can still use their areas as they have done it before. Other factors are procedural justice, which is about the transparency and the fairness of the planning and permission procedures, and also strongly connected to the relationship between the acting stakeholders, which means the transition system operators, local initiatives, municipalities and residents, and also in the trust and between those people, and which motivations they think or they perceive from each other. So this is just an overview of the collection of different acceptance factors. On the next slide, you see the results of the study, and please do not be threatened by all the figures. I try to point out the main results or the main message here. As you see on the left column, we conducted a standardized questionnaire poll in three case sites, in different case sites in Germany at 2 points in time. So we have a trend measure in 2012 and 2014, and we asked for all the different potential acceptance factors, and you see that the most significant and the only consistent acceptance factor of all for all three case sites at all 2 measurement points in time is the perceived need, which means the need for the grid extension, the need for the line which was planned. And this goes in line with other findings of general acceptance factors. The first and maybe most relevant point is the orientation and insight. That means if people understand the necessity of a political decision or an infrastructure and support the goals, they are more likely to accept it. And of course, to do so, to see if a measure or an infrastructure makes sense, they need transparent information, and especially the pros and cons, and also here in the case of transmission lines, knowledge and information about potential alternatives. So the need, I think, is one relevant, very relevant point, which has to be also communicated and in a transparent way shown. And we distinguish on 2 question levels. So the perceived need goes for the if question, if a transmission line is built, if this really needed, and then the other factors relate to the how question, which means if it's built, then how it is concretely built and planned, and where are the potential for regionally shaping the trace. On the next question, on the next slide, you see a picture which shows again the acceptance factors we have, and the point here is that all those different acceptance factors, and when I'm talking about they have to be communicated, they have to be explained, they have to be transparent information provided that people can build a solid opinion. This strengthens, or this shows and illustrates the meaning of the participation's procedures and planning and permitting processes, because the participation is the window of opportunity, the window in time when both the stakeholders meet each other and many residents come the first time in contact with the topic and the question of grid extension. And here all the different information have to be provided, and not only in one time, but better in a continuous way. And as I said before, as we have many laypersons, not only on an expert level, but also in a way that laypersons can easily digest the information and build their own opinion. And secondly, in this slide, which is important, you see it in the box at the bottom, the goal of participation should not be to increase acceptance of the outcome. That means the outcome of that all people now like the new transmission line, but the goal should be that they accept the procedure, the process, that they say, okay, the permitting process was fair, and that the legitimacy of the process is increased. And of course, participation provides also much more, maybe better solutions for the planning outcome in terms of integrating local knowledge and local expertise on some details where to go with the trace. And of course, in a broader view, it increases the perception of a democratized energy transition. Also on participation, there have been some research done in the last years. On the next slide, you see one example of an European project, is InspireGrid. We were part of this project, and so this also illustrates that the questions of acceptance and participation are not only part of Germany, but of course all over Europe. And on the website, you can still see some materials where we tried to put together some recommendations for stakeholder engagement. and also some tools like multi-criteria and other approaches for to integrate stakeholders and to illustrate the complex nature of grid extension and to get solid opinions. On the next slide, I show you one example from Germany, which shows that it's not a new topic. So you see on the left corner in the upper corner, Forum Netzintegration, which was founded in 2009 and which I think is a very nice example for a joint project where stakeholders from environmental protection associations together with civil initiatives, but also with the TSOs and municipalities come together and tried really to work jointly on new ways of grid planning and of new participation ways. And these are only some examples for illustration of I think a valid and valuable way that it's not only the responsibility and part of the, for instance, Federal Grid Agency or the TSOs, but also a joint work of at the end of the whole society. But of course, there has been some structures then to empower also society to take part in the grid development. And on the next slide, you see some illustrations also from participation measures from the Federal Grid Agency. Also there was, I think, a strong development towards participation and integrating the public. And you see some examples from YouTube videos for providing knowledge about the different phases and the different levels of grid planning in Germany. And you see on the right bottom corner also the different participation dimensions, because I think most of you know that grid planning is quite complex. We have different dimensions and levels, and it takes some years of time, so it's not a one-shot thing, but it has to be a continuous process. And this is exactly what we need in this context, a process perspective. And I think not only one of those levels is the most relevant one, or only one is needed, but we need this instead of a either or dimension. We need a both and approaches. So we need all of those dimensions. We need both continuous participation over the whole process, added by some project-related participation measures from the TSOs, for example, on the regional level, where all those different acceptance factors I showed before are addressed. And as we have some differences in regional meanings, and some are more the risk questions relevant and some are more the landscape questions relevant, then we can respond with those measures, with the participation methods, then to the respective needs on local level. On the next on the next slide, I show you one example, again from Europe. This is from UK, from National Grid. And as I said, it's not only a task and challenge for Germany, but for all European countries where grid extension is conducted. And this is, I think, a quite nice example. There's a guideline for stakeholder engagement, and I showed you only a screenshot, but it's a whole a big brochure where you can read. The link is provided below and the bottom, where you can read about the strategy behind and all the different steps, what you can do. And what I think is also interesting and important in this context is that on the right you see this kind of the participation paradoxon that you have to cope with, that you at the very early stage the interest is quite low, but you can and the knowledge is low, but on the other hand degrees of freedom are high. And later, when projects are more processed, then of course the knowledge is higher, the interest is higher, but maybe it cannot be changed so much. So this is important to reflect that in this process level, where different stages and the participation measures have to be accordingly changed and adapted to that. On my last slide, you see again, so my summary would be that we see that many conflicts we observe are connected to the question of justice, and on different levels, and as I showed, distributive but also procedural justice. Participation is one relevant measure in this context, but as I said before, it's only one beside others, so it's not the silver bullet for everything. You still have to be a good technological planning and solid planning. And of course, there's not one size fits all solution, but you have to adjust the measures to the local or regional needs, and the solutions depend on the type of conflict. In this context, this leads to the second point. I think it is important to reflect that we have not only the public as an homogeneous group, but we have different groups with different needs. And I think beyond the typical groups and the focus like residents or the public, also some other groups are relevant. And in this context, especially the role I see, or we see, especially the role of municipalities as a relevant intermediary, as a multiplicator, as a moderator, and source of information as a relevant level. And the last point is that as the grid extension, and Sven Rösner mentioned it in the introduction, the whole process of energy transition will be, it's not a short-term project, but we have to deal with this challenge, let's say, or with this task for the next decades. So I think this counts also then for grid extension, and also for the acceptance questions and connected participation measures. So I would suggest really to think about in a process perspective, and to think this permanent, to establish structures, continue existing consultation approaches, think of new ones, and try to keep the balance between effectiveness of affected people and the influence on the planning. And with this, I say thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Exciting stuff, and I would like to introduce Saskia Albrecht and Delphine Porfirio, who will join us now for a quick debate. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Maybe to you both who work for a transmission grid operator, respectively, and with the people in the concerned regions. Maybe from Delphine, a first reaction to what we just saw. Is that something you can confirm? Do you see some approaches that you also apply in your work?
Yeah, sure. And among the different factors that Mr. Hildebrand showed in his presentation, I totally agree with the different factors. For instance, the need for the people to understand why we need to make the grid evolve. Yes, it is the first generic factor, of course, and also the different things you told about the different players that you have in front of you in each consultation. It's also something that we encounter. Yeah.
Okay, and the same question to Saskia Albrecht. From your point of view, Germany has, of course, a huge project to develop the transmission grid, and we saw in the Easter package that this has been expanded, even with new projects added and quite a few modified also. Is this something you also came across, these observations, and how do you go about them?
Yes, I'm responsible for Südlink. That's the biggest HVDC line in Germany, the underground cable from the northern of Germany to the southern of Germany. And I totally agree with the fact that we have different target groups in our participation concepts, and we also try to offer different participation moments or formats for example, the municipalities or the citizens or the farmers. So we use this in the communication and participation for Südlink as well.
Okay, and maybe one question to the three of you. We see that generally across Europe, the energy transition has a very good acceptability as a project, as a whole project. But as soon as a project is prepared in the neighborhood of someone, I also think of wind farms, for example, also PV ground-mounted plants now in some cases, that this acceptability cannot be guaranteed. What would be your first or your main explanation for this, and what do people expect when you come? Is this a question of compensation, or what are their what do they expect from you when you speak to them? Maybe Delphine.
Well, it's a very, very broad question, and I think it's the whole topic of the discussion of today. So yes, we make the same observation that in general the need for an ecological transition is accepted and understood by the people, but as soon as there is a project, and this project will take place in the environment of these people, it's more complicated to conduct it. Yes, but so there are a lot of things to do to handle with that. But first, as Mr. Hildebrandt said, it is crucial that people understand and are in line with the need for this transition. So there is a recent report that has been written some months ago in France, and it was written by the CESE, that is the Council for the Economic, Social and Environmental, at the beginning of the year. And one of the recommendations of the CESE was to organize a large debate in France about the future, about the future of the energy that we will be using in the next decades. And also RTE made such a broad study about the future of the energy in 2050. So it's very, very important to have this first step, because if people are not convinced that you must change, you can do any consultation you wish, you won't succeed.
Okay, Saskia Albrecht, maybe on the same question.
Okay, when I think of Südlink, the first time we started the communication and participation for Südlink was in 2014. There, Südlink was an overhead line, and it was very, very difficult to the discussion to lead with the citizens because of the fact that we planned overhead line, and therefore we didn't get the discussion to the fact why the line is needed. They just don't wanted the line, and we were the first who explained in the regions the need for lines. We explained what is a Transnet BW, what is TenneT, what are we doing the whole day, and why we need lines for the energy transition. And then the politic decided in 2015 that Südlink has to be planned as an underground cable. And that changed the discussion in the regions completely, because then you could discuss more to the fact why the line is needed, and it was easier because the line wasn't so frightened by the people. It's because you don't see it. doesn't change your landscape for the first time, but the target group changed completely, because now we discussed very intensively with the farmers who are using the ground and where we need to use for the cable. We made different forms of discussions for Südlink, but the first questions in the regions are why there, why we, and why we need the line. And of course, everybody knows it. You find every information in the internet, and the citizens are very clever to use the internet. And so all what we are sent from facts is also completely read by, or you have different opinions in the internet what are completely different from what we are saying. So it is very difficult to lead the discussions and to send the facts, because we are new. We are not part of the region. We are a company far away from there, and so everybody is a little bit don't trust us and don't trust our information.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so
Was a long way.
we see that that trust is a big factor. That leads me to the next question, maybe for Jan Hildebrand. In the Easter package, we see that the government has, the federal government of Germany has identified grid expansion as a key factor, key success factor for the energy transition. And we also see that it is likely that the requirements for consultations will be reduced. If we talk about trust, how do you judge that as a scientist? Is that the right way to go ahead? Is this something that can have a short-term benefit, or will it have a lasting impact on the acceptability of new lines, for example?
Yeah. Maybe I try to connect the question to your answer now, maybe to a answer to the question before, because I think it's somehow connected. And
of course,
as you ask for the general acceptance for, let's say, energy transition and the differences on local level, and I think we have to distinguish, or we have to be aware that we have not only transmission lines, but we see a general trend, I think, and contesting infrastructures, if it's streets, motorways, or in other contexts. So I think we have first of all, in the society, we have a general trend, to be more active and maybe to more defend, let's say, one's own interest when it comes to new infrastructure planning. So this does not only count for energy infrastructure, but we see for all infrastructure. And this is, I think, an important general trend in the background, let's say. And then I think it's fair to say that, of course, when also we have examples for this in other contexts or in other areas, energy transition as a general or principal vision, of course, as an idea in future, somehow not really concretized and so on. And then a concrete, very concrete object and very personal effectiveness. I think this is also to say that more or less, I think it's clear that there might be a difference in the reaction. And then I think when we come to the responses, then I think it's important to say that many of those responses are on the emotional level. It's not, let's say, cognitive rational, but strongly emotional. Saskia Albrecht mentioned the shift in Südlink from overhead transmission lines to underground cable and the reduced visibility. And you all know the power of pictures. And when we looked at the conflicts we had with the transmission lines, with the monster mass, this is one of the first reactions which come. And you see in Germany, it's often I don't know the word in English, the big church in Cologne, as the Kölner Dom and the cathedral. I think it's the cathedral in Cologne as one emotionally loaded picture, and the transmission line, the monster mast next to it. Maybe in France it might be Notre Dame or the Eiffel
Yeah, it's
Tower.
not as high as the
You know?
cathedral in Cologne, but I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I just want to say we're talking about emotions, and the pictures illustrated, I think, quite well. And then this leads to the question of trust, you know. So when we when we talk about who do we trust, I mean, in Germany we have 4 transmission line transmission system operators, and they are the most, you know, they are responsible by law, of course, but I think objectively they are the most competent one. They have the most data, the most experience, and so on. But still, some people think that they are not competent in really managing the network or in really defining the need. And this is interesting. And we have, and they trust more, for instance, some local initiatives who have worked on this topic then for the last 2 or 3 years. But and I think the main difference in this context is they are local and they have no monetary motivation. At least for Germany, I don't know how it counts for the other countries, but we see that this is a strong, let's say, antitrust predictor. That when you have economic managed, let's say, companies who have, of course, they want to do what they want to have a profit. I mean, the local bakery also wants to have a you know, to make profit with their road. But yeah, I see we have to invest more in the trust. I hope I answer by this your question. So I think it is a key measure, because all the information you give are only valid if you trust the source of information. And if the TSO or another player provide the information, then and it's not trusted, then the information is in the perception of the subject not valid. Of course, we have some approaches how to increase trust again. I think the Federal Grid Agency as a more or less neutral player plays an important role. And also we have those in the participation procedures, there's ways of joint fact-finding, that finding together, you know, together with the initiatives, for local initiatives, together, external experts, they also trust. So to extend the circle, let's say, of stakeholders, this would be also one way. Sorry for the long answer.
No, but it's a complex topic, so it also deserves a complete answer. So that's very interesting, and that gives us plenty of things to explore. Meanwhile, to everyone following the webinar, don't hesitate to send us your questions so that we can use them towards the end of the webinar. So we see trust is the central topic, which is, of course, as it's more or less a psychological thing, other than simpler topics maybe than, let's say, money or financial compensation. How do you go about this, Delphine Porfirio? How do you inspire trust in France, RTE, and maybe whom are you working with to boost trust?
Well, we are talking about trust, and we are talking about the different stakeholders that you meet during consultation. It's good to have in mind that we have already several lines on the whole territory of France. So we have more than 100,000 lines on the whole territory of our country. And we have an ongoing relationship with the people living around our infrastructure, around our lines, and by our substations. And so we already have this relationship that is very, very important to have, because before starting a consultation process about a new project that you may have, for example, a new line on a specific area, you must know what you are getting into. So you must know precisely the local context and we make what we call a context study. We try to know which stakeholder is important at this place, and Jan Hildebrandt said you must know there are different groups of players, and they have different needs, and it's totally true. And so before starting consultation process, you must be aware of the people living in this country, their projects, because they didn't wait for us to have a project, to have their own projects. For instance, they can have processed, but other infrastructures like roads or access to mobility or access to to knowledge and so on. So it's very important to know about that, because you will find some people among the different people that you will meet during the consultation that will be allies with you, because they have project, and you can conciliate your own project with theirs, and you can enhance your projects and theirs too. And you also have opponents for sure that will be against your projects because of all the factors that we told about during the previous minutes. And you can also have a lot of people having no idea or no opinion about your project, my project. So it is important to see all these people and to characterize their needs, and to find the best way to inform and to catch their needs in order to enhance your project.
Thank you very much. Saskia Albrecht, maybe the same question for you. Germany has seen quite a lot of protests, of course, against high tension lines, also with the decision to to opt for underground lines instead, which has a huge impact on cost, of course, also on the time necessary to build it. How do you ensure the good communication with stakeholders in the regions where you work? And also maybe how do you assess, or how do you evaluate the change that would come if the new regulation on simplifying planning procedures would be adopted by the parliament?
Okay. Maybe for the first part of the question, in my team we have a so-called Bürgerreferent. It's a referent just for the region. It's one face to the citizen, and he is known by the citizens. And now they are in the team since several years, and they know everybody. They know the mayors, they know the municipalities, they know the questions of the region. That's very important. And they are the first contact for questions from the region to us. And therefore it's very important that they are always reachable. They live in the region, and they know the places. They know the lakes. They know everything from the region. That's very important because they speak the language from the persons who live there, and that's always increasing the trust in us and in our planning. We send the message, we know what we are doing because we know the region. And in the changing of Südlink from overhead to cable, we had time to think about our participation concept, about our communication concept, and we planned to use the window of participation before we are sending the first application to the Federal Grid Agency. And we had 6 months. We could participate the region for our plannings, and everybody had the opportunity to give us notices for the planning. It was a very big challenge because we had over 6,000 notices, planning notices. There could be there is a nature reserve. There we are planning a new a street or something for something other things we didn't have in our plannings. So we could check the notices and could challenge it with our plannings. And after that, we sent the application to the Federal Grid Agency. But it was a very hard job because everybody in our team knows or knew that we have a very high number of notices, and every notice was answered by us, by our planning team. And that was also a fact that increasing the trust in our planning and increasing the trust in our participation concept, because we answered every notice, and that was a very big challenge for the team, but it was very important because now we are living from that trust in that what we did in 2016, and we could say that the participation before application improved our planning because we changed our planning in several corridors, and we also give that feedback to the regions, and everybody could see that with the notices our planning was improved. And after that, we started the formal permitting process. And that was very, very important. And we started the participation before the formal permitting process. That was very important for us, but it was a very, very, very big challenge because we did information sessions in every region. We were there with the planning team, with the communications, with everybody, and it was for us very, very high vacation time. We were always on tour, but it was a very good effect for the planning and for the trust in our planning.
Okay, so we see that there is the issue of consultation, but then also of the action that follows to inspire trust. Jan Hildebrand, did you look into this more in detail? If we say consultation, that also means compensation, maybe not financially, but by other means. Do you have some examples for us where what you would find an interesting solution to show stakeholders that you take them seriously, and maybe in France, Germany, or abroad?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, I would like to maybe, yeah, to agree what Saskia Albrecht also just said, that that we observe regarding the consultation procedures also a big learning curve, and I think it's so important to also to reflect that, of course, also TSOs are organizations that can learn, that are able to learn and willing to learn. And when we made our first studies around connected to the Forum Netzintegration 2009-2010, it was let's say a different world, and I expected from the last 10-13 years now how the TSOs they build up their own participation groups or communication groups, much more professionalized. At the beginning, the engineers were dominating, let's say, but a bit simplified now. But and now it's much more really on people who have a high competence and communication skills and really are aware of changing perspectives and getting into, let's say, the minds of the people. And also the consultation measures had changed. So at the beginning, the strategy was mainly some big events, but not so much in numbers. I don't know, along a trace, maybe 3 at central points. And now, just as you said, much more. You have regional groups, you have continuous persons in the regions, one phase to build really up relationships to all those different stakeholders. And I think this is exactly, and you take the time, the effort, invest, let's say, time and money for answering each question, and this is exactly what is needed and what people then also perceive. So I just wanted to say maybe at this point that we see this learning curve, and I think it's important to stress that there is a learning and that consultation has much or really improved and for all those TSOs, and I see it, and we had this Inspire Grid project with RTE together, what I showed on one slide, and also we had contact with Terna in Italy, National Grid, or in Statnet in Norway, and I know that is also happening there, that the role of participation is much, has grown within the TSOs, and they put much more effort, time and money on it. Regarding the combination of consultation and compensation, I'm always a bit skeptical, but I try to explain why. As I said, or as I showed, we have different acceptance factors, and some of them are related to. So let me start this way. We have different acceptance factors, and we have, when we think about measures to address them, then I think these measures should be also differentiated by on which factor they have an impact, or which factor they address. And when we talk, at least this is my perception, and the discourse and the discussion somehow in Germany about compensation, this is, at least at some people's mind, this is like this one size fits all measure. So we do compensation and everything is fine. And I think this is the wrong approach, and also not valid when we look at the factors, because when we have the conflict, as we talked about with farmers, they can't use anymore their ground due to undercables, or residents fear decreasing property prices due to the pylons. Okay, then we are on a monetary level, and compensation might be the right measure to cope with that. But when we are on the level of people have really experienced a deep fear about cancer because of EMF, and then explain, you come and offer them money, very simplified now, you might even increase the conflict, and you might increase distrust because they see you don't understand them. Sorry. And you just want to pay them, or even they might perceive it as a bribery. So I would say, yes, compensation has its role beside others, and it's again about the combination. I think we can learn a bit from the field of renewable energies, of course, where the instruments of financial participation are a bit more advanced. But I think it's also fair to say that there are maybe some borders and what's possible. And at least for Germany, I remember there were some pilots and financial participation when I think of, I don't have the English translation for this, the Rösler dividend, when Mr. Rösler was secretary for in the
Economy.
Ministry for Economy, exactly. This was very successful, and I know also a pilot project in Schleswig-Holstein on the west side, west coast. Up to my knowledge, this was also not very successful in terms of the financial participation. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's maybe the infrastructure itself does not really provide so much opportunities. And for me, the difference between renewable energies, where we have also like energy cooperatives, and as one possibility, I think it's easier, and also transmission lines as kind of a basic infrastructure for society. I think it's difficult, maybe also as a signal, to think about more compensation than useful, because then maybe for every street you can contest and you can try to get for compensation.
Thank you. Lots of things to think about. Delphine Porfirio, in 2015, there was survey published on the expansion of the grid and how it could be done. And I remember one proposal to facilitate acceptability was to create some kind of European fund for infrastructures as a compensation, so that regions with high tension lines would receive maybe a train line or a university or something like that, rather than giving directly money to stakeholders. Would that be something also in the context of what Jan Hildebrand said, that would facilitate your work, or rather increase maybe skepticism among stakeholders?
Well, I totally agree when Mr. Hildebrand said that it is not the only mean that can lead to a better acceptability of your infrastructure, but it may help. And in France, we have such a disposal, and if I translate it in English, it would be well, the support plan for the projects. And each time we have a project of an overhead line, if the voltage of this project is 400 kV, then you have an amount of 10% of the total amount of the projects that is dedicated to this support plan. And for the lower voltage, you have 8% of the total amount of the project. And so this is an amount that you put on the table, and RT does not decide to whom this amount will be allocated. And the prefect, the regional prefect, receives different kind of local projects, such as well, something that is enhancing the living conditions of the residents. So he analyzes the different kind of projects he receives, and then he decides to whom the amount will be given. So for us, it's well, it belongs to the different possibilities to that we have to make this better acceptance of our projects. And it's very, very important for us not to decide by ourselves who will be the people or the associations that will receive the money. And it's really a local affair, and it's conducted by the regional prefects with the local associations, and it can be of help for our projects. But it's not a response to the fears that could be given about the EMF, because you told Mr. Hildebrand about the electromagnetic field. So it's not, well, there is no relation between this mean of financing such local projects and the way we deal with the precautionary principle about the EMF. It's totally different.
Of course. Saskia Albrecht, is that something that, how is that handled in Germany? I mean, for renewable projects, usually there are taxes paid to the local community. I don't know how this is handled with transition grid. What ways are there, let's say, for or how is compensation designed in Germany? And also one question maybe that Delphine maybe did, or one question that I would ask after what I heard from Delphine is, are the people in the region aware where the money comes from? Is this communicated? As you don't give it directly, will the prefect say that this money comes from RTE, for example? Maybe we take that quickly and then we go to Saskia.
Yes, it's not there is no secret about it.
And they communicate about it.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Sure,
Good.
because yes, there are some meetings dedicated to this separate plan, and people around the table know what we are talking about and where it comes from.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for completing this. So Saskia Albrecht, on the same question, how is this handled in Germany, and what are your experiences with those forms of compensation?
In Germany, we have a strong legal framework for that, because we are regulated by the Federal Grid Agency, and the possibility to compensate the using of the properties from the land farmers or owners of the property is regulated by the Federal Grid Agency. We don't do any individual compensation. What we are doing at the moment is we are negotiate the frame for the compensation for the land users and farmers with the federal farmer communities, which are getting the Südlink, that's Schleswig-Holstein, Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria, Thuringia, Niedersachsen, and Hessen. And they are sitting on the table with us, and we are negotiate the frame, the frame for compensate the using of the property from the farmers with them. That are hard discussions, because we are not able to leave the legal framework, because if you do that, every other infrastructure project would be measured by us, and so we have to use the legal framework. We are getting special things for Südlink, but can be explained by the project, but they're fitting with the legal framework. So we are not very free in doing individual compensation acts or something like that. It's strong regulated, and we have to always be in touch with the Federal Grid Agency, because that are costs what everybody in Germany has to pay, and so we are. It's very, very important for us that we are sensitive to that fact, because it's also a fact that the landowners can use the ground and their property after we have built Südlink. So they own their property. We just compensate the building period, and maybe the loss of harvest because of the building period. But the landowner stays the landowner, and he gets the Südlink, and that is the fact that we are compensate and not more.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I remember when I was talking to Benessa that there is a strong issue about from what point something could be considered as a bribery also. So that was in the context of the decision to build underground lines, or rather compensate overhead lines. Maybe Jan Hildebrand, from your side, one estimation. As I said, in the Easter package, we find this one measure that planning procedures should be reduced in order to accelerate the build-up of the new transmission grid. Is this for you something that will work in the long run if we let's say, assist to a degradation of possibilities for stakeholders to have their say in the planning procedure?
Well, I'm not sure how at the end of the day really comes out. I mean, there's a lot of discussion right now about, of course, speeding up permitting procedures, and I think there is the need. I think it's fair to say that, I don't know, 5 to 7 years is maybe too long, even if we're both for transmission lines, but also for the renewables. And if we look at the vast need for faster energy transition, you mentioned all the different reasons: energy security, war against Ukraine, and so on. So, and of course also to meet our targets. And I think that there's still a large amount of renewables needed, and corresponding to that, a large amount of new transmission line infrastructure. And this leads, when we try to meet the targets, then of course we have to speed up. And then the question is, what is the right way to speed up, and what is to understand what are the factors which are in the last years which are inhibiting, let's say, quick solutions. And I think even in a hypothetical 2 years permitting procedure, I think there should be enough participation possibilities. So there's enough space, and I think the colleagues here have enough competence to consultate also in the 2 years. So this is for sure, I think, fine. I think the main, from my point of view at least, the main point, if I see the discussions also in the wind energy sector, will be with those with the colleagues from the nature conservation groups about standardized and maybe even a bit reduced criteria, on nature conservation. I think it's a relevant point, especially again for Germany with those 16 federal states and somehow differing, I say, interpretation of those criteria. But I think that I see the need. I think it's a good step, and it's time to do this. We should have maybe even done this 10 years before. But as you said, it should be avoided that the participation is decreased, or the possibilities are decreased due to the speed up. But I don't see really the risk. I think it should be possible also in 2 years to have a good participation process.
Thank you very much, Saskia Albrecht. So we heard from Jan Hildebrand that there was a learning curve in consultation processes. You have a tool called WebGIS, I think, for this. Also, would this allow you or other measures to maintain the same level of participation even in a reduced time frame for the build-up of a new line, for example? Maybe you can explain what is so special about your tool, and how it can help to maintain a good level or a decent level of participation and speeding up the processes.
Okay, I said that we had a lot of time because the politicians in Germany decided that Südlink is built as a cable now and not as an overhead line, and so we could planned our communication and participation new. And this question we asked was how we can reach the citizens and explain the planning, that they understand what the planners were doing. And so we are using a geo-information system internal for planning. And so we are asked ourselves, why can't we use this for the citizens as well? Why can't they see the plannings through the glasses of the planner? And how can we reduce the complexity of criteria, of planning criteria, that the normal citizen, Lieschen Müller, understand what the planner was thinking about and what is important for the steps of the planning. And that was the starting, or the moment of the WebGIS. It is reachable from our websites, from südlink.com. And everybody who is checking the planning of Südlink gives us notices about the WebGIS. This lands at our planners, and they are checking the notices. They challenge them. They search if this is a notice that we have to take on in our planning. And we started the using in 2016, and we didn't know is it the right thing for the citizens, because it is very complex. But we were very surprised how good it works, and how everybody can understand what we are doing and how complex the planning is. Because if you look after the wide distance from the town, you are landing in the forest or in something else, and so you can see that every criteria is important, and you have to find the right way. And that was a very, very effective instrument, and we are using it in Südlink every time and in every period of planning. Now we just have one corridor, and we are looking in Südlink for the wide line. And also now we are using the WebGIS. It's part of our communication concept for the whole planning. And I think maybe we are using it till we are building. We are developed the instrument further with our planning team, and we are very happy that we decided to do that. Although we had a very, very hard job because of the big number of notices which was sent to us, and we had to answer. But I think participation is expected by the citizens, and so we have to plan it. And I think I also agree with the opinion of Jan Hildebrand that we find the wide window for that. I think it is a fact that you have to do that when you want to build an infrastructure project in Germany. I think everybody expects that you are go into the region, that you make your planning transparent, and that you are asking if this is the right way, that you are explaining what you are doing.
Great, thank you very much. Delphine, Porfirio, can you give us a French point of view on this topic? How are you going about speeding up the procedures without reducing the level of interaction with your stakeholders?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was very interesting to hear Mrs. Albrecht talk about this specific tool, and we will be very interested to see it.
So that's the first success for our webinar, I think. Okay.
Sure. And yes, for sure, I totally agree that the participation of citizens is essential. Because if you try to implement a project without associating the people who are concerned by the project, well, everyone will say, well, everything is decided without us, and we have nothing to say, so it's unthinkable. And so we have a lot of means to do that, and it's very important to associate well a wide range of the population that is concerned by the project. And when you organize meetings or information or face-to-face meetings or remote meetings, well, some people won't come and won't express themselves. So you have to go and find these people. You have to go door to door. You have to, for instance, organize itinerant buses, just like a presidential campaign. For instance, you have to go in the city halls, in the markets, to organize targeted meetings. So yes, there are a lot of things to do to make people express themselves and not to have only one voice that is raised against your project, for example. So yes, it's very important to enable people to participate. And as Mrs. Albrecht said also previously, it is very important to ensure an accountability to these people, because when people get involved, it is very important to tell them then in return what we retained from what they expressed, and how we will make our project evolve to take into account the observation that we received. And it takes a lot of time. We also have website platforms and so on, and we take the time to answer to each request, to each question. It takes a lot of time, but it is absolutely essential.
Thank you very much. It's 11:15, time to wrap up. Thank you ever so much, Jan Hildebrand, Delphine Porfirio, and Saskia Albrecht for your participation today. It was very inspiring, very interesting. And I think we all take a lot of things with us to think about. Just before we sign off, a few announcements. Do take a look at our upcoming conferences on our website. All of them shall be from now on held in situ for the months to come, at least. The next one is on May 24th. That is next week's Tuesday, the financing of renewable energies between macroeconomic tendencies and microeconomic solutions at the French Embassy in Berlin. On June 14th, we have PV and spatial planning in Paris at La Défense. And on June 29th, a political debate on the transformation towards a climate neutral society and economy with many top flight speakers, for which you can join us at the French Embassy in Berlin, of course. You can register for all these conferences on ofate.eu or dfpev.eu, where you will also find very soon today's slides and many interesting papers that you might find helpful if you want to broaden your horizon for everything concerning the energy transition. For example, our latest publications on the planning procedures for grids might be very complementary to what we were talking about today, or our summaries on the evolving regulatory framework for energy in Germany and France. And that is all from my side for now. I thank you very much for tuning in today, for your questions. Thanks a lot again to our three speakers. I wish you an excellent day, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.